This week we are coming to you from Riggins, Idaho, a beautiful, lush green valley in the heart of the Idaho backcountry, kind of in the conjunction of the Wallowa, Whitman, Nez Perce, and Payette National Forests. So we are way out there, and it feels really, really good to be out here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting trying to get this uploaded. There is one cell tower, and it's in Riggins, and there is no line of sight to it.
Yeah, we've had to drive into the little town of Riggins and find a place to park to be like right below the cell tower to have reception that's good enough to like do homework or anything really on our phones past maybe loading like a Google search or something like that. So it kind of feels a little bit like we've stepped back in time to like a different lifestyle, because it's a very different world here. Last week, and by last week I guess I really mean last episode that we uploaded.
Well, we're doing one a week now again.
We're trying to.
For now.
Yeah. We were still in Texas. We were just outside Amarillo at Lake Meredith, and now we are all the way up in Idaho. Yeah.
We made it a long way.
We've covered a lot of ground in not a very long period of time, which is really, really cool. And one thing that I've been thinking about throughout this entire trip, seeing the countryside that we've been passing through, I've been thinking about the settlers and what their experience must have been like navigating this countryside before there were roads or maps or anything. I mean, it's really mind-boggling to think about it, and I have a ton of respect for the people who did it, because it's a challenge with like modern day conveniences. It can be a little bit inconvenient, and they were doing it with a wagon with wooden wheels and like a team of oxen or horses, and that is how they made their way west. Like that's incredible.
Yeah, we were on dirt roads in BLM land, and just like this road is rough enough, and then you look to your right and you see just little divots, little dried creek beds, everything. Those little bitty divots are like canyons, and those little mounds are like mountains. I can't imagine doing that in anything not new.
I know.
It's hard.
I know. Jouncing and bouncing along on like a rough wooden seat. It's something that I don't think anybody can fully understand or appreciate. Like we can kind of think about it and conceptualize it, but to really understand what people went through to make this country what it is, we have like zero frame of reference.
Yeah.
And just traveling through the landscapes that we have been, I've gotten just a little bit of a taste of what that might have been like, and even that is just, it really blows the mind. But we are in Idaho now, and the reason we are up in this beautiful part of the country is because, like we mentioned last week, we got hired for a work camping job this summer, and that's what we want to talk about this week. Just how we found this job, what the application process was like, why we wanted to work camp in the first place, and just kind of everything that goes into the work camping experience, such that we have knowledge of it right now, because obviously we haven't started working yet, and by the end of the summer I'm sure we'll have by the end of the summer I'm sure we'll have a lot more anecdotal information that we can convey. But for now we can at least talk about what has gotten us to this point and why this is something that we really wanted to do.
To set up the table, and so you can get the imagery of where we are right now. We are adjacent to the Salmon River, and it's probably 50 yards wide, very deep. They do jet boat races here. I'm looking up a mountain as we speak. It is super green.
So green.
Where we are here, it's not quite the high elevation. Although, if you look on the top of these mountains, if there's an electrical pole to be seen, it is like the size of a toothpick. It does not look fathomable how big this country is, and I guarantee they had to travel by boat back in the day.
Probably.
But that's the setting that we're in. We're going to be starting our work camping in about 4 days, and we're here to bring this to you. We wanted to kind of start it off and tell you how it started for us with work camping, and the way how we started work camping was very organic, and as a lot of y'all may know, we do a lot of volunteering, and we're pretty passionate about volunteering, because a lot of public agencies and things of that matter, they rely a lot on it. And so we had been volunteering at a state park in Texas, Mission Tejas, for well over a year.
Mm-hmm.
I think close to 2 years, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd always seen their work campers. We'd always been helping out, being friends with them and the employees at the state park, the state employees. And it came up just one day out of the blue. It was like, hey, how do they do this? How do they get in on this? And the guy, Jared, he was like, oh, well, you just talk to whoever organizes it. And I was like, who does? He's like, me. I was like, oh, hi.
We'd like to talk to you about work camping.
We'd like to talk to you about work camping. He's like, yeah, absolutely. We could always use the help. And so he told us to, go on, do the formalities, online application, and they had a spot come open. And just so happened it was like right after winter. We had just gotten, a whole lot of things, maintenance knocked off on the RV. And so we drove over to the state park, parked there, and pretty much assumed the duties that we'd been volunteering with, a little bit more of the day-to-day stuff of like making sure the bathrooms don't look like somebody just like had a tornado happen with the toilet paper, with just making sure that trails were a whole lot clearer and not just like a project whenever we go out there every week or two. And so that was the start of our work camping experience, and we knew that we would like that. I mean, we knew we wanted to do that going forward.
And so to kind of rewind just a little bit back to why we wanted to work camp at all, last summer, we spent the entire summer traveling throughout the U.S. We hit a bunch of states, most notably the Black Hills in South Dakota and the Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming were our two favorite spots that we stopped. Yeah. And it was an awesome experience. It was like our first time dipping our toes into the full-time travel, full-time off-grid kind of lifestyle, and we loved it. But the biggest thing that we came away with, well, not the biggest thing, but definitely something that was a contributing factor to this decision, was just the fact that we felt like we had to keep moving the whole time. And granted, we did have a deadline that we needed to meet because we had to be back in Indiana in September for my brother's wedding. But we felt like we would have liked to have been able to set up base and hang out in certain areas a lot longer. Like, I know I wish we could have been in the Black Hills for a little bit longer than we were. We really only ended up being there like a few days. And obviously, traveling is expensive, especially now with gas prices being what we are. That's something we talked about in our last episode. But we really wanted to figure out a way to travel, but have a base and maybe save some money. And the obvious answer, I mean, there are different ways to do that, but the obvious answer for us was to work camp. This is something we've talked to people about before. It's obviously a huge thing that people in the RVing community do, and we thought that it was something that we could definitely put ourselves out there to try to do ourselves, and it might meet a lot of the needs that we have. So that was kind of our reasoning for wanting to pursue work camping. As a quick aside, it is raining right now, so if you hear any background patters, that's what that is. And I wasn't thinking, but before we sat down to record, we put the dogs in the back and I gave them a couple rawhide bones. So if you hear crunching, that's them going to town.
Quite the imagery.
They are having the times of their lives back there, but you might be able to hear it.
These things are the size of a femur.
Yeah, they are. I spent good money on those. But that was kind of what went into us work camping. And so then from there it was like, okay, where do we want to work camp at?
Yeah. That, along with the fact that it's not super easy today to take 55 feet or so of truck and RV into a lot of really, really remote places. Yeah. It's super hard just clearance-wise, turning-wise. And so the way to get to the really good places that aren't just, ran through with people is to disconnect the RV. And then we have the whole thought of, hey, this is our whole lives are in these things. And so it'd be really great if we could just unhook, not worry about it.
Have
And
security.
then, yeah, have some security and be able to then branch out. So we looked at, I can't tell you, I probably went to 250 links looking at different RV spots, from through a contract with the National Forest to up in New Hampshire, up in Maine.
You're talking about like work camping.
Yeah, for work camping, to South Dakota, to southern Utah, Arizona, even, Tennessee, West Virginia. And one place we didn't get to go was Idaho last summer. We didn't have all the time in the world to go west from the Bighorns in that area towards the Tetons and towards Idaho. And that was one thing we really felt like we missed out on. And we didn't go there because we didn't want to just like go for a day or two
and then have to rush away.
And then rush away, backtrack. And so we applied for, I want to say I sent only 3 or 4 emails out.
Right. So we looked at there are multiple websites out there that will host people's like job announcements, basically. So an RV park or whatever will go out and post on there, hey, we need however many people for these months, and these are this is the job description and the requirements, and this is what you'll get in return, blah blah blah. And the website that we spent the most amount of time on, the one that we saw the most listings, was happyvagabonds.com. And they have listings for pretty much all 50 states, and you can go on, and what we were doing was we were typing like work camping jobs Idaho, work camping jobs Utah, and then we would go through and click on the links, and a lot of them were for happyvagabonds.com. And then once we found a job listing that looked hopeful, we would look up the name of the place, usually on like Google Maps or something like that, look at pictures, and then we would look at the reviews, and based off of the combination of where it was at in the country and what people were saying about the establishment, we would determine whether or not we wanted to apply there or not.
Yeah, without trying to, I'm not running any names through, because one, I don't remember them, through the mud, but there are, in the RVing community, there's the active type of RV community, and then there is the, what's a good way to say that? There is the senior based RV community, which it's like retirees. It's like you can't have grandkids at your site. You can't have pets. And that, not that I disagree with that. I mean, there's a time and place for everything, but that just didn't fit for us. And instead of wasting their time and our time, we're trying to find places that looked relatively active, that had good reviews, because we value the personal connection we can have with an employer. That's something really important to us, because we want to be somewhere positive.
Exactly.
And then lastly, kind of what part of the country it was in, because there might be an RV park, but I'm not going to go in downtown Detroit and do it. No. I'm sorry. That's not us.
Yeah, and there were a couple that we looked at, and it was like they were right next to like a major highway or something like that. And it's like, a lot of road noise, and you probably get like a lot of like transient in and out people, and like not really something that we wanted. So we kind of went in with a set criteria, and we were looking for places that checked all of the boxes for us. And we found, like you said, like 3-4 places that were like, this could be a good possibility. And based off of what it said in the job posting, we reached out either via email or phone or whatever the case may be.
So I guess we can read to you guys exactly what our email said, and it was kind of the same for the couple places that we reached out to, because but it says, "Good afternoon, my name is Stuart Griffin. Rebecca and I came across your job listing for work campers at the RV landing at Carlson Ranch on happyvagabonds.com. We live and travel in our 2013...
Hold on. You probably shouldn't give away the name of the place we're going.
Okay.
Right. And instead of reading the whole email, maybe you should just hit the highlights.
Okay.
So rewind to how you'll go through, rewind.
Okay. So I guess I can just go through kind of the basics of the emails that we sent to people. But this says, basically, we came across your listing on happyvagabonds.com. It says, we live and travel in our 2013 Shasta Oasis full-time. We're both outdoor enthusiasts who love working with our hands and being outside. we'd like to take the opportunity to talk with you more about the work camping position and hope you'll consider our application. And then we attached a copy of our resume as well as a picture of our RV. Let us know if you have any questions. We look forward to hearing from you. And we gave them, a resume, and maybe you can talk more about that, because I was used to, and initially, before we sent this, we had a resume that looked very different than what it does now. Maybe you can talk about how we changed our resume.
Yeah, so a lot of these places, not all of them, but a lot of them want to see a resume, and they want to see a picture of your setup, whatever it may be. And that makes sense. They want to get a feel for the people that they're hiring, and they want to make sure that you look like you would be a good representation of their business, because they're hiring you for a set number of months, and you are going to be an extension of them. So the places that give a damn want to make sure that you look respectable. So it's really, really common for them to want to see pictures and resumes and that kind of thing, but we didn't really have like a work camping resume yet. So I went down and I did some like Google research and found templates for work camping resumes, which actually do exist, which is pretty cool. And based off of those templates, I created one for Stuart and I. But after I did that, I actually got a ton of input from my dad, because he's really big into like the RVing lifestyle and like work camping and that kind of thing too, and he listens to a lot more of the podcasts than we do, which is funny because we're doing like a RVing podcast, but we don't really listen to any other RVing podcasts. But anyway,
but he listens to ours. That's cool.
Yeah, but he listens to ours, and he listens to others, and he gave us some awesome input. And the biggest thing that we did for our resume, and the thing that I think maybe helped us stand aside, or like stand apart from everybody else, is that we kind of combined our like prior like law enforcement military experience with like RVing specific things that we've gained. So we have like our customer service and that kind of thing, but we also have like property security and like team leadership and conflict resolution. And then we also have like RV maintenance and repair, and for Stuart, he has like low voltage and solar electrician, things like that really set us aside and set us apart from the other people who might be applying for the same job. And I honestly really think that had a lot to do with it. And then the other thing that I know was a big part of it was our references. And this is why I am so glad that we have put so much time and effort into volunteering over the years, because we actually had a really, really nice references section, and I know for a fact that was a huge contributing factor to us getting a call for an interview and ultimately getting the job. So that was a really interesting aspect of it, creating a resume and everything like that. I was a little bit nervous about it because I've never really had a resume before, and I've never had to use one to get a job, but ultimately it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And I think those few key things, the references and the RV travel specific like job skills, were what really set us apart.
I think the biggest thing that I can say, that our references and that our professional summaries and skills and all of the experience that we've had, I think the biggest thing that we wanted to have them take away from it is that we are a asset and not a liability.
Yes.
I think we are both very active people, very able-bodied people, and very educated people, and so I think that was kind of the big reason why that made such a big difference.
I agree.
So after we sent this email off, we sent a few off. We did hear back from a couple, and the RV park that we're going to now, we ended up having a phone call with them.
Like a phone interview.
Yeah, a phone interview a couple days later, and I think that was also a really, really good thing. That helped us, and I really liked the personal connection with the people, and I liked that it was a smaller operation and not just like a big chain group,
or like our huge RV resort or something like that,
or a big huge resort type deal. Rebecca and I are both from smaller communities, and we are kind of outdoor based people. And I think that going somewhere that falls in line with a lot of that it just felt very natural. Like
Mm-hmm.
we ended the phone call being like, even if this doesn't happen, that was a great interview. I enjoyed that a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really about all we had to do. We gave them pictures of our dogs too, because that came up in conversation. And we told them we have their records if you need them. And it was just all to get a picture of kind of who we are. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we represented that very accurately.
And so I do want to speak to the interview process and
Mm-hmm.
everything a little bit, because I know for me going into that, I was definitely nervous. I was nervous about the resume because I have like performance anxiety, I guess, or whatever. Like I want my work to speak for itself, and I was nervous about that because I'd never done that before. And I was nervous about the phone interview because I've never like really interviewed for a job before either. And I know for a lot of people that could kind of be a little bit of a detracting factor, or could make you a little bit nervous, especially if you're younger like we are and you don't have a lot of job experience under your belt. And the biggest thing that I can say is just to go for it. Like, just put yourself out there, go for it. Go into the experiences that you have interacting with these people, your like potential quote unquote employers. Just go into it with like a warm attitude and hope for the best. And it'll all work out okay, and it'll be all right. And ultimately, it wasn't nearly as stressful as I was thinking that it was going to be. It really wasn't bad at all. And it was really cool because the lady that interviewed us said that she really liked our resumes, which was nice to hear, and that our references, she called a couple of our references, and they like gave us glowing recommendations. And she basically was like, it's down between you and one other person, and if you don't get the job this year, would you want to do it next year? So it was like a very, very positive experience.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, regardless of how it would have worked out, we came away from it feeling pretty good.
Yeah. As with any job interview, I think the biggest piece of advice for it I could give is to be sitting up. Don't be laying in bed doing something. Be sitting up. Be acting like you're sitting across from the person, and be ready to answer questions of like, what would you do?
Mm-hmm.
That goes with any job interview.
Mm-hmm.
But they asked us specifically, like, what would you do if this happened while you were there?
Mm-hmm.
What would you do in this situation? Just use your head. Use your experience in any kind of way that you can to support what you have. And
if all else fails, it's like your parents always told you growing up. Follow the golden rule. Treat others the way that you want to be treated.
And ask for help when you need it.
Yes, exactly. So, well, obviously everything went really, really well, and we ended up hearing back from this particular RV park within like a week, and they told us that they would like to extend us the opportunity to work for them for the summer, and we were like, absolutely, that's incredible. We
didn't apply just because just for the heck of it. We
like
wanted to come here.
Jumping up and down whenever we got that phone call, because we were so excited, and like called all of our family and everything, because up until that point, the idea of going somewhere to work for the summer was kind of an amalgamous idea. Like, it was out there, and we had an idea that we could get to it and do it, but it didn't seem fully real up until that point. And once we got that phone call, it was like, okay, like this is happening. Now we have something to work towards. And that was really, really exciting. So the job that we applied for is going to be from the beginning of May until the end of October. So it is a full season's work, and it's a really, really cool place because it's a smaller business, like you said, and it's a family-run business, which we really, really like, and the people just seem so down to earth and so awesome. So I want to get into a little bit of like what we'll be doing specifically, or like what we've learned from our last work camping gig when we were at Mission Tejas for a month. But before we do that, I want to go pour myself a cup of coffee.
Me too.
So if you'll give us a minute, we're going to go pour ourselves a cup of coffee, and we will be right back. And we are back.
Got my coffee.
Got a couple cups of joe. The perfect day to like sit inside and record a podcast and drink coffee. It's drizzly, and I can see the mist rolling in over the mountains, although I suppose it's actually clouds.
Same but different.
Same but different, yeah. And it just feels very, very cozy. We're at this really cool spot It's basically a Forest Service parking lot.
Recreation site.
Yeah, like a recreation area right on the Salmon River. There's picnic tables and fire pits and a couple of pit toilets and just an open parking lot, and you can just kind of pick a spot and park, and we're right next to the river. So when I look out the window when I'm making coffee or doing dishes, I can see the Salmon River, and it is a really pretty area. Like, I feel like people have been sleeping on Idaho.
No, it's not that good. No, we had an understanding as to making sure that we did not talk it up too much.
I know. And I understand why they want to keep it a secret, because it is such a beautiful place and it still feels wild, and it's really hard to find wild places.
Yeah, it's because a lot of people suck. A lot of
True
people
enough.
ruin things.
True enough. Anyway, I don't want people to know where we are. But if you want to know where we are, or you're looking for a place to come for the summer, just shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'll tell you. But I just don't really want to put it out there. I don't know. It just maybe
we're not here to advertise. We're not here to advertise for this place.
Yeah, that too. So, but anyway, we'll talk about what we've been told our responsibilities will be there. So when we were at Mission Tejas, we had to fulfill a minimum requirement of 24 hours a week between the two of us. So that was 12 hours a person, and that included anything from just like daily maintenance things like checking the bathrooms and taking out the trash, to filling in as needed with if they had an event going on and they needed help setting up, or if, I don't know,
reserving spots at RV spot, yeah.
Or if a tree came down and they needed help getting it cleaned up. Literally anything and everything. You're just kind of there to fill in the gaps and help out, because most of the parks are kind of understaffed and they have more work than they do people. So that's why work campers are such an asset for them. And that was kind of what we did while we were there, and it was honestly, it was great. It wasn't hard work, and I found it really, really satisfying just to kind of have a schedule every single day and know that I have to do certain things. We hadn't really done anything like that since we've been living in the RV, and having that kind of structure throughout our day was really, really nice.
Yeah.
So I liked that.
Yeah, our schedule, our typical schedule was, depending on how many hosts there were, it was 2, 3, or 4 days a week, and it was up to 24 hours. I guess it could have been more, and some of that kind of, it's a formality, as long as all the work gets done. If you do more, that's cool. If you end up doing 6 hours worth of labor in 4 hours, that's cool too. But it was 2 to 3 to 4 days a week of pretty much just trying to make the park as appealing as it could. Like, if you were going to go there and camp, how you would want it to look. And we already want to do that anyways, just because, I mean, we really like the place and care about it. So it's just basically trying to make the park exactly what you would want a visitor to see.
And I really like that aspect of it a lot, because you and I both have been at our fair share of parks and like public spaces like where we're at now, and we've definitely seen the gamut from very well maintained and cared for, and somebody obviously cares about it, to does anyone ever come here at all? Did they forget that this place even exists? So being a part of that was really cool. And you will find across the board with work camping that most of the time the duties and responsibilities are pretty much the same. You're doing the same kind of thing, you know, helping with checkout and helping maintain things and keep things clean. So we already kind of knew to expect that going into applying for this current gig that we're going into. And this one was, as you would expect, pretty much the same. The cool thing, I think it's kind of cool, is that this RV park is actually new. It's only been in operation for, I think, a couple of years. And so the owner-operators are still figuring out how to do everything. And I kind of like that, because we have the opportunity to kind of come in when things are new. In a way, I think like they're not going to be super jaded yet, because they won't have had bad experiences with work campers who, like, let's be honest, there are a couple of bad apples will spoil the bunch. So they have a very like open and positive attitude about everything, which I really, really like. And they even asked us, like, during the interview process, you know, this is the number of hours we were thinking, like, does that sound good to you? Or like, what's been your experience? Like, they were kind of asking us and gauging our response to see what our expectations were, which was kind of cool. But going in, we'll have a 20 hour a week requirement to meet, which is basically in exchange for our site and everything. And then anything past that, during the busier months or busier times of the week where they need more help, there actually is an opportunity to make a little bit of money. And that's something that we want to talk about, because every single park kind of does things a little bit differently.
Yeah, and it's not like we intentionally sought out the easiest place we could, because we could,
No.
if we wanted to be in the easiest place possible, we'd just go in the middle of a forest to somewhere and not even have an RV park at our disposal. But there are opportunities out there that are not exactly, they're not all the same.
Yeah, no.
And so there were opportunities for like full-time positions where it's a resort per se, for instance, per se.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like a what are the RV parks you
like
see?
a KOA.
Yeah, like a KOA
Yeah.
or a Good Sam. Or
There's like KOA, like a potential there is like, hey, we need a full-time position for someone to do housekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
And in exchange for that, you get a site with a $200 allowance, or $200 towards your
site fee.
site fee. And so that's great for people that need a full-time job, and that's great for people who want a discounted place to live. But then there are also opportunities where it's like 20 hours between the both of you, and you get your spot and it's paid. There are places that had less hours even.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't exactly want to go work a full-time job being a housekeeper and get a discounted site, because we're kind of outdoor-based people, and we're using this as a stepping stone to see places and not to go.
It's not just about
change
the job.
sheets. Yeah. It's not about the jobs.
Not to knock changing sheets at all.
No,
like if somebody was like, and honestly, this place, they do have a couple of cabins, and they were like, hey, if you take over responsibility of maintaining these couple of cabins, we'll pay you X amount a week. I'd be like, okay, great, I'll do that.
That's fine.
But yeah, it's like we wanted to be somewhere where we could work but also have room to play. Mm-hmm. And so that was a big part of our, like, a big check that we were looking for, a check in a box. And that helped us weed through a lot of different places, because you really have to pay attention to the I don't want to say the fine print, but just the actual details of the work that you'll be doing. Some places will put it all out there in the job posting, and other places you kind of have to dig to find out what exactly it is that they want. Every place is a little bit different, but we really liked this current place that we're going to, because they were basically mimicking what we were already familiar with, X number of hours in exchange for a site, and anything past that, like, you'll get paid or whatever. We liked that because it's just simple, it's clean, it's easy to understand, and everybody's on the same page going in.
Yeah, and it's a smaller place too. We keep saying that, but it's a smaller place.
It is so small.
Yeah, but it's a smaller place too, in that I'm sure if anything ever came up, it's very easy to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And it's not like we're calling a 1-800 number trying to figure out
There's a human element.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing to me out of everything that we've gotten from this place, is that there's a human element to it, and I like that.
Mm-hmm. So I imagine, we'll be able to speak to it a whole lot more once we've actually done the work, but I imagine just from what our conversations have been, we'll be doing a lot of the same thing, maintaining bathrooms and helping with checking in guests and maintaining the grounds, and that'll pretty much be what our summer will consist of, and I'm honestly really looking forward to it. I've found as I've gotten older, it's interesting. When I was younger, I was such a social butterfly, and I craved social interaction, and I would seek out opportunities to put myself out there in any way, to interact with people, to get up in front of people and perform even. I had no fear of being up in front of people or putting myself in situations like that. And as I have gotten older, I have found that has gotten harder and harder and harder to do. And it's not so much that I have social anxiety, it's just that I feel uncomfortable putting myself in new social situations the older I get. And I found that the only way to combat that is to continue to put myself out there and push through those uncomfortable feelings. And I think that this summer will be a really good opportunity to do that in a really good place, because last summer we really didn't get a whole lot of that. And I think it's important to kind of, it's like any muscle group in your body. If you aren't consistently interacting with people and like brushing up on your social skills, it's perishable. Like you will lose it. And
100%.
I don't really want to lose it. Like I'm definitely a loner, and I like my own space and my own company and solitude, and I like the kind of
Introverted.
yeah, introverted lifestyle that we have, which is such a good word. But I don't want to let that become my entire personality trait. And I think that this, from like a mental and emotional perspective, is going to be a really good growing opportunity for me and for us both.
Yeah, it's somewhere that we can go, and we're going to be actively doing things. We're going to be around people, and as much as of an introvert as I am, I don't have like a ton of friends who I could just go over to their house and hang out. That's just not really me. I have a small group, but then with people that are as I think of them, relatively strangers to me, I love it, and so.
You like interacting with new people.
I like interacting with new people, and this is no more. There is no clearer of a circumstance in which this happened, of it being a perishable skill. As we were in Colorado, northeast Colorado last summer, and we were on a hiking trail, and we passed some people, and we had probably the most awkward 5-minute talk of my life. We hadn't seen people in 2 weeks, hadn't had conversations in 2 weeks
with anybody but each other.
And I just kept repeating myself.
Yeah, it was an awkward conversation because it was like we had forgotten how to carry on a conversation and like progress the conversation forward.
Other than just, this is what's up.
Yeah, it was funny, and that's something we come back to a lot with all of this. So yeah, I think it's going to be a really good thing, and I'm going into this too with really no expectations. I have no expectations for what it's going to be like past just the idea of the work that we're going to be doing. But at the same time, I'm such a huge believer in just putting yourself in the way of good things happening. And I find that when you go into situations with that attitude, good things find you. Like, I don't know if it's like some kind of law of attraction type thing or what, but I think back to all of the opportunities and experiences that we've taken advantage of, and how in the long term they have ended up benefiting us in some way or another. Not because we went into it looking for that, but just because you put yourself out there and you put in the effort, and I find that the world has a way of repaying you for that. Like, we never would have been work camping at Mission Tejas if we hadn't at one point just started out as volunteers there. And we didn't go into that thinking, oh, we'll work camp here eventually. It's just the way it worked out and how everything settled. So while I have no expectations for this particular job, I'm excited about the future, because experience has shown me that when you put yourself out there, good things come.
Yeah, I've had several good experiences just on the way here. Of things that we put ourselves in the way of. And going forward, I mean, there's even places that we've been through that I'd be like, hey, we could come back here. I mean, there's several places from last summer, and then places from along the way here where it's like, I would come back here. You want to come back here? We could. We can always look for next year.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
But that's kind of where we're at so far with the year. This is how the background behind how we've arrived at this point, how we found this particular gig that we're going into, and it's kind of a real-time report on where we're at, because I know a lot of people, when they talk about like work camping or something like that, they're coming from it from the perspective of like being completely on the other side, having already done it all, they've got it all figured out, they have the roadmap. We don't necessarily have the roadmap, but we're figuring things out as we go along, and
it's fun to share.
Yeah, like I want to share that with people, because I feel like you don't get that. Like, you get the finished product, the polished.
There are
like,
the people over here, and there are the people over here.
Yeah.
The haves and the have-nots.
Well,
the have done and haven't.
Yeah, it's like you get the master class at the end.
Yeah.
This is how you work camp, and we're giving you more of like a experiential, this is what we're going through and what we're going towards. So I kind of wanted to share that with everybody.
If you have an RV and you have the ability for several months, whether you be retired, whether you be not having to work in a specific location, if you do remote work, I think it's a really cool opportunity to go somewhere that you might never. I mean, you don't have to go somewhere that you're familiar with. We're not familiar with Idaho. I think it's gonna be very fun, and I see us doing this again.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Fingers are crossed for a very positive experience going forward, and we'll be sure to continue to share little like nuggets of quote unquote wisdom that we pick up along the way.
Well, it's funny you say that. I think next week, as you had said previously, we should discuss safety on the road. That's a big thing that we've had to make sure of and be safe with. Be safe with safety. Be cognizant of our safety. Let's try and share some of that wisdom next week.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely want to do that because there are so many pros to traveling and kind of living this lifestyle. But there are also things, they're not cons and they're not detracting factors. They're just things that you need to be aware of. And it comes with anything that you do. And I think it's really, really important to speak to those things whenever we get the chance. And safety is a big one because everybody should be able to take advantage of this lifestyle if they really want to and live it to the fullest and enjoy it. But nothing is going to ruin your day faster than like not being careful or making an easy mistake. So we will be talking about that next week. So if you're interested and you want to hear that that episode, make sure that you subscribe to or follow this podcast so that you'll know when that episode goes live. And then also, if there's a particular topic that you would like to hear us speak on that you maybe haven't heard us go as in-depth into as you would like, just let us know. You can reach out via email or you can DM us on our Instagram and just let us know what you'd like to hear. We are always open to suggestions from our audience, and because we really, really appreciate the support and you guys listening each and every week. It means more than you know. But I think that's where we're going to leave the like work camping segment for now. We'll be picking it up later on down the line as we learn more and pick up more tips and information. But I want to go ahead and move into our feel-good story segment for the week. This
is something we accidentally made a habit and that we decided to carry on with. It's a nice way to end the podcast. It's regardless if we're talking about a super sensitive subject or something, really, really out there, really lighthearted. It ends us on a positive note, and I think that's a pretty cool thing.
And I really enjoy hearing stories like this, any kind of story, and we've talked about quite a few different types of stories. And this one, I found this on a site called wearemetoo.com, and I will link it down in the show notes so that you can read it. This is actually a story from March of 2021, so it's a year old, but last week we read a story that was from like 2015 or something, so it doesn't matter. If I've never heard it before and I like it, I'll share it.
This is going to be really interesting because normally I'm finding them and you haven't heard them, and we're flipping it today. I have no clue what you're talking about.
Well, the headline of this story is okay, and I will warn you, trigger warning, it starts out dark, it has a happy ending. So we go through the valley of the shadow of the damned, and then we come out on the other side. So I'll put that out there now because you're going to hear this headline and you're going to be like, wow. So the headline is, woman who watched her mother die before her eyes while at sea as a 9-year-old reunited with her rescuers. And this is from March of 2021. So on May 20th, 1986, it started out for Desiree Rodriguez and her family as an idyllic morning. At the time, Desiree's father, a 30-year-old construction worker by the name of Thomas Rodriguez, had taken her, her mother, and sister, as well as an aunt and uncle, out to Catalina Island for a day of sailing. The plan was to go out, fish, and bask in the summer sun before heading back home. In the evening, just as they were headed home, the family was impacted by a dense fog. Desiree and her 5-year-old sister Tricia awoke from a nap on the boat to calls from her father to abandon ship, and within minutes the entire family was lost at sea, out in the water and away from their boat that had capsized. The family of 6 was stranded in the chilly Pacific water for hours, and Desiree watched as her father first went to swim for rescue and never returned. In the hours that slowly stretched by, Desiree witnessed the death of her sister, her mother, her uncle, and then her aunt. Decades have passed since her family's accident, but Desiree has lived to tell of the story thanks to the men who rescued her. In a recent piece by the New York Times, Desiree was reunited with the two men who were remarkably able to save her after she spent a nightmarish 20 hours in the ocean. Only 9 years old at the time of the tragic events, Desiree recalls believing that her father would return with help when he first swam away from the boat. "My dad was like the superhero to me. I actually thought he would get help," Desiree explained before calling the desperate hours that followed. After watching her family members die, she found herself all alone. "At that point, I just kind of made the decision, I need to get away from this boat," Desiree recalled to the New York Times. "I need to swim away somewhere else. Where? I don't know where." Just when Desiree decided to give up hope, the skipper of a commercial sport fishing boat spotted her orange life jacket in the water. The boat's first officer leapt into the water and fished Desiree out of the water. Desiree was ultimately transported back to San Pedro and never saw her rescuers again. "I don't think I would have lived, I'll be honest with you. I think at that point I was just kind of done," Desiree explained in a recent interview about the incident. According to an article at the time that described the incident, Desiree had suffered no major physical injuries and was in good spirits. She left the hospital in San Pedro the next day. "I had even hoped that my dad did make it somewhere," Desiree explained of her thinking at the time. "Maybe he is living on an island and just got amnesia and didn't know that he has a family. You know, you always have hope. But you get older and reality sets in and you're like, okay, he didn't make it." Paul Strasser and Mark Pisano, the two men who rescued her, ultimately earned commemorative plaques for their bravery from Mayor Tom Bradley. Desiree Rodriguez, now Desiree Campuzano, was adopted by another aunt and uncle who raised her. She went on to attend junior college in Fullerton, built herself a career in criminal justice, married, and had a son. Still, she always wondered what had happened to the men who saved her. It wasn't until the COVID-19 pandemic that Strasser and Pisano came into contact with Philip Friedman, who launched a podcast about his hobby as a fisherman. Friedman Adventures, which launched this past December, shares incredible stories from fishermen. One episode, Pisano spoke about the 1986 rescue. "It's kind of a weird story, kind of like there was some supernatural qualities," Pisano explained of the experience on the podcast. Friedman felt motivated to unite the two rescuers and Desiree. Ultimately, a friend of Desiree's heard the episode when it aired and made the connection. He reached out to Desiree and then Friedman, and ultimately she and her rescuers were reunited. "I was nervous at first," Desiree said of meeting Strasser and Pisano, "just seeing the guys and putting kind of finalization to what happened." The three were finally reunited during another episode of the podcast. "I feel like she's sort of our daughter in a way because we brought her back to life," Strasser said during their reunion, "even though we never knew each other."
How on earth did they find each other?
I don't know.
That's a miracle.
I don't know. And I really like that story just because, I don't know, I've said it before, but I love stories about people who beat the odds and like come out on the other side. I mean, we read that story in the last episode about the football player who swam for like 16 hours to reach back to shore, and he survived that ordeal. And then a 9-year-old girl who literally watched her entire family die before her very eyes, probably thought that she was going to die too, but she didn't, and she came out of it and she survived because these people were just in the right place at the right time.
Oh man, that is just wild. That is 20, 30, that's like 35 years later. She's able to meet the people that saved her life, and while she's still the same person, life has completely changed, and she's made a life for herself because of those people who saved her. There are heroes among us everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just feel like you don't have to, but whenever I hear a story like that, because I am who I am, I cannot help feeling like there's some divine intervention there. And even the two men who rescued her said that they felt like there was something otherworldly about just the fact that they happened to be there and were in a position to be able to rescue her.
Yeah.
So I saw that headline and I was reading the story and I was like, wow, this is the story that I want to share, just because I love stories about the endurance of the human spirit and what people can overcome. So I hope that kind of makes you feel as like uplifted and good as I do. It's like, yes, bad things happen to all people, and there's nothing that we can do about that, but you can use the negative experiences for good, and you also never know what's going to come out of that experience. Like, something can seem terrible, and then you go through it and it ends up actually being for some kind of good, or something positive comes out of it in a way that you didn't think it would be possible.
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of instances that you could just tweak history just a little bit and you wouldn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
The people listening wouldn't exist. If our parents hadn't met, if they hadn't had certain jobs, in this case, if she hadn't been rescued, that's pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm. So that is where we're going to leave it for this week. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, rate and review this podcast wherever you may be listening. It really, really helps the podcast out. If it's a podcast that you enjoy, doing that helps ensure that it reaches more and more people, which is obviously a goal of ours. We want more people to be able to tune in and hear us ramble. And if there is something you'd like to hear us talk about, if you have feedback that you'd like to give us directly, you can email us at maybewe'rejustrambling@gmail.com, and then follow us at maybewe'rejustRambling on Instagram. I think I said that twice.
That's okay. That's kind of what the basis of the podcast is made on. It's pretty raw, minus the points where we're like, hey, we're going to get coffee. It's relatively uncut, and we really appreciate the people listening, and we hope they would continue to do that. Mm-hmm. And share it with someone, even if it's just for like, hey, listen to the last 10 minutes in that story. It's pretty cool. We hope that it does continue to reach more people, as you said, and that we can continue to be consistent with it.
We'll do our best.
We will do our best, but we are the outdoor enthusiast type, so it is one of those things that's very easy to put off. Mm-hmm. For a number of weeks. If something comes up, we'll be sure to fill you in after the fact. But I think, yeah, we'll leave it at that, and we really, really appreciate how I appreciate how we've been able to talk, and it's been very organic, and how there's a good purpose behind this. It's not just for the people listening, it's for us. It feels good to just sit down and intentionally talk about a subject. Mm-hmm.
I agree. So we hope you'll be back with us next week for our next ramble all about safety on the road. And until then, I am Rebecca.
I'm Stuart.
And this has been our ramble.